Good morning, everybody. Today I'd like to do one more day of sutta readings. Yesterday I read the Magandiya Sutta, which is the 75th sutta in the Majjhima Nikāya, and it's quite a good one. It's on the topic of sensuality primarily, and today I'd like to read another one on that same topic. So my intention here is to present some of the Buddha's teachings on the nature of sensuality, as it is the first of the five hindrances. It's a big one that we face in the practice, and we have to overcome and abandon for the mind to be able to settle down. So it's very helpful to hear the Buddha's perspectives on the nature of sensuality and his the ways in which he talks about it, and he encourages us to think about it. And so I'll read Sutta 13 from the Majjhima Nikāya. It's the Greater Discourse on the Mass of Suffering, or the Mahadukkha Khanda Sutta. The essential point is that sensuality, sensual pleasures, are a great mass of suffering, and but it's very interesting the ways in which the different perspectives and frames that are brought to the discussion of that. And then after this, then I think there will be time for me to do read another sutta on the topic of ill will, the second hindrance. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was living at Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's park. Then, when it was morning, a number of bhikkhus dressed, and taking their bowls and outer robes, went into Savatthi for alms. Then they thought, it is still too early to wander for alms in Savatthi. Suppose we went to the park of the wanderers of other sects. So they went to the park of the wanderers of other sects and exchanged greeting with the wanderers. When this courteous and amiable talk was finished, they sat down at one side. The wanderers said to them, Friends, the recluse Gotama describes the full understanding of sensual pleasures, and we do so too. The recluse Gotama describes the full understanding of material form, and we do so too. The recluse Gotama describes the full understanding of feelings, and we do so too. What then is the distinction here, friends? What is the variance? What is the difference between the recluse Gotama's teachings of the Dhamma and ours, between his instruction and ours? Then those bhikkhus neither approved nor disapproved of the wanderer's words. Without doing either, they rose from their seats and went away, thinking, We shall come to understand the meaning of these words in the Blessed One's presence. When they had wandered for alms in Savatthi and had returned from their alms round, after the meal they went to the Blessed One, and after paying homage to him, they sat down at one side and told him what had taken place. The Blessed One said, Bhikkhus, wanderers of other sects who speak thus should be questioned thus. But, friends, what is the gratification? What is the danger? And what is the escape in the case of sensual pleasures? What is the gratification? What is the danger? And what is the escape in the case of material form? What is the gratification? What is the danger? And what is the escape in the case of feelings? Being questioned thus, wanderers of other sects will fail to account for the matter, and what is more, they will get into difficulties. Why is that? Because it is not their province. Bhikkhus, I see no one in the world with its gods, its maras, and its brahmas, in this generation with its recluses and brahmins, with its princes and its people, who could satisfy the mind with a reply to these questions, except for the Tathagata, or his disciple, or one who has learned it from them. And what, bhikkhus, is the gratification in the case of sensual pleasures? Bhikkhus, there are these 5 chords of sensual pleasure. What are the 5? Forms cognizable by the eye that are wished for, desired, agreeable, and likable, connected with sensual desire, and provocative of lust. Sounds cognizable by the ear. Odors cognizable by the nose. Flavors cognizable by the tongue. Tangible is cognizable by the body. that are wished for, desired, agreeable, and likable, connected with sensual desire and provocative of lust. These are the 5 chords of sensual pleasure. Now, the pleasure and joy that arise dependent on these 5 chords of sensual pleasure are the gratification in the case of sensual pleasures. And what bhikkhus is the danger in the case of sensual pleasures? Here, bhikkhus, on account of the craft by which a clansman makes a living, whether checking or accounting or calculating or farming, or trading or husbandry or archery or the royal service, or whatever craft it may be, he has to face cold, he has to face heat, he is injured by contact with gadflies, mosquitoes, wind, sun, and creeping things. He risks death by hunger and thirst. Now this is a danger in the case of sensual pleasures, a massive suffering visible here and now. Having sensual pleasures as its cause, sensual pleasures as its source, sensual pleasures as its basis, the cause being simply sensual pleasures. If no property comes to the clansman while he works and strives and makes an effort thus, he sorrows, grieves, and laments. He weeps, beating his breast, and becomes distraught, crying, "My work is in vain, my effort is fruitless." Now this too is a danger in the case of sensual pleasures. A massive suffering visible here and now. Having sensual pleasures as its cause, sensual pleasures as its source, sensual pleasures as its basis, the cause being simply sensual pleasures. If property comes to the clansman while he works and strives and makes an effort thus, he experiences pain and grief in protecting it, thinking, "How shall neither kings nor thieves make off with my property, nor fire burn it, nor water sweep it away, nor hateful airs make off with it?" And as he guards and protects his property, kings or thieves make off with it, or fire burns it, or water sweeps it away, or hateful airs make off with it. And he sorrows, grieves, and laments. He weeps, beating his breast, and becomes distraught, crying, "What I had, I have no longer." Now this too is a danger in the case of sensual pleasures. A mass of suffering visible here and now, having sensual pleasures as its cause, sensual pleasures as its source, sensual pleasures as its basis, the cause being simply sensual pleasures. Again, with sensual pleasures as the cause, sensual pleasures as the source, sensual pleasures as the basis, the cause being simply sensual pleasures, kings quarrel with kings, nobles with nobles, Brahmins with Brahmins, householders with householders, mother quarrels with child, child with mother, father with child, child with father, brother quarrels with brother, brother with sister, sister with brother, friend with friend. And here in their quarrels, brawls, and disputes, they attack each other with fists, clods, sticks, or knives, whereby they incur death or deadly suffering. Now this too is a danger in the case of sensual pleasures, a massive suffering visible here and now, having sensual pleasures as its cause, sensual pleasures as its source, sensual pleasures as its basis, the cause being simply sensual pleasures. Again, with sensual pleasures as the cause, men take swords and shields and buckle on bows and quivers, and they charge into battle massed in double array, with arrows and spears flying and swords flashing. And there they are wounded by arrows and spears, and their heads are cut off by swords, whereby they incur death or deadly suffering. Now this too is a danger in the case of sensual pleasures, a massive suffering visible here and now, having sensual pleasures as its cause, sensual pleasures as its source, sensual pleasures as its basis, the cause being simply sensual pleasures. Again, with sensual pleasures as the cause, men take swords and shields and buckle on bows and quivers, and they charge slippery bastions with arrows and spears flying and swords flashing. And there they are wounded by arrows and spears and splashed with boiling liquids and crushed under heavy weights, and their heads are cut off by swords, whereby they incur death or deadly suffering. Now this too is a danger in the case of sensual pleasures, a massive suffering visible here and now, having sensual pleasures as its cause, sensual pleasures as its source, sensual pleasures as its basis, the cause being simply sensual pleasures. Again, with sensual pleasures as the cause, men break into houses, plunder wealth, commit burglary, ambush highways, seduce others' wives, and when they are caught, kings have many kinds of torture inflicted on them. The kings have them flogged with whips, beaten with canes, beaten with clubs. They have their hands cut off, their feet cut off, their hands and feet cut off, their ears cut off, their noses cut off, their ears and noses cut off. And here's a list of various torture methods that were known at the Buddha's time, it appears. They have them subjected to the porridge pot, to the polished shell shave, to the rahu's mouth, to the fiery wreath, to the antelope, to the meat hooks, to the coins, to the lye pickling, to the pivoting pin, to the rolled up palace, and they had them splashed with boiling oil, and they had them thrown to be devoured by dogs, and they have them impaled alive on stakes, where they have their heads cut off with swords, whereby they incur death or deadly suffering. Now this too is a danger in the case of sensual pleasures, a mass of suffering visible here and now. Having sensual pleasures as its cause, sensual pleasures as its source, sensual pleasures as its basis, the cause being simply sensual pleasures. Again, with sensual pleasures as the cause, sensual pleasures as the source, sensual pleasures as the basis, the cause being simply sensual pleasures, people indulge in misconduct of body, speech, and mind. Having done so, on the dissolution of the body, after death, they reappear in states of perdition. They reappear in states of deprivation, in an unhappy destination, in perdition, even in hell. Now this too is a danger in the case of sensual pleasures, a mass of suffering in the life to come, having sensual pleasures as its cause, sensual pleasures as its source, sensual pleasures as its basis, the cause being simply sensual pleasures. And what, bhikkhus, is the escape in the case of sensual pleasures? It is the removal of desire and lust, the abandonment of desire and lust for sensual pleasures. This is the escape in the case of sensual pleasures. That those recluses and Brahmins who do not understand as it actually is the gratification as gratification, the danger as danger, and the escape as escape in the case of sensual pleasures, can either themselves fully understand sensual pleasures or instruct another so that he can fully understand sensual pleasures. That is impossible. That those recluses and Brahmins who understand as it actually is the gratification as gratification, the danger as danger, and the escape as escape in the case of sensual pleasures, can either themselves fully understand sensual pleasures or instruct another so that he can fully understand sensual pleasures. That is possible. And what, bhikkhus, is the gratification in the case of material form? Suppose there were a girl of the noble class or the Brahmin class or of householder stock, in her 15th or 16th year, neither too tall nor too short, neither too thin nor too fat, neither too dark nor too fair. Is her beauty and loveliness then at its height? Yes, Venerable Sir. Now the pleasure and joy that arise in dependence on that beauty and loveliness are the gratification in the case of material form. And what, bhikkhus, is the danger in the case of material form? Later on, one might see that same woman here at 80, 90, or 100 years, aged, as crooked as a roof bracket, doubled up, supported by a walking stick, tottering, frail, her youth gone, her teeth broken, gray-haired, scanty-haired, bald and wrinkled, with limbs all blotchy. What do you think, bhikkhus? Has her former beauty and loveliness vanished and the danger become evident? Yes, Venerable Sir. Bhikkhus, this is a danger in the case of material form. Again, one might see that same woman afflicted, suffering, and gravely ill, lying fouled in her own excrement and urine, lifted up by some and set down by others. What do you think, bhikkhus? Has her former beauty and loveliness vanished and the danger become evident? Yes, Venerable Sir. Bhikkhus, this too is a danger in the case of material form. Again, one might see that same woman as a corpse thrown aside in a charnel ground, 1, 2, or 3 days dead, bloated, living, and oozing matter. What do you think, bhikkhus? Has her former beauty and loveliness vanished and the danger become evident? Yes, Venerable Sir. Bhikkhus, this too is a danger in the case of material form. Again, one might see that same woman as a corpse thrown aside in a charnel ground, being devoured by crows, hawks, vultures, dogs, jackals, or various kinds of worms. Again, one might see that same woman as a skeleton with flesh and blood, held together with sinews. Again, one might see that same woman as a fleshless skeleton smeared with blood, held together with sinews. Again, one might see that same woman as a corpse, as disconnected bones scattered in all directions. Here a hand bone, there a foot bone, here a thigh bone, there a rib bone, here a hip bone, there a backbone, here the skull. Again, one might see that same woman as bones bleached white, the color of shells, as bones heaped up more than a year old, or as bones rotted and crumbled to dust. What do you think, bhikkhus? Has her former beauty and loveliness vanished and the danger become evident? Yes, Venerable Sir. Bhikkhus, this too is a danger in the case of material form. And what, bhikkhus, is the escape in the case of material form? It is the removal of desire and lust, the abandonment of desire and lust for material form. This is the escape in the case of material form. That those recluses and Brahmins who do not understand as it actually is the gratification as gratification, the danger as danger, and the escape as escape in the case of material form, can either themselves fully understand material form or instruct another so that he can fully understand material form. That is impossible. That those recluses and Brahmins who understand as it actually is the gratification as gratification, the danger as danger, and the escape as escape in the case of material form, can either themselves fully understand material form or instruct another so that he can fully understand material form. That is possible. And what, bhikkhus, is the gratification in the case of feelings? Here, bhikkhus, quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states, a bhikkhu enters upon and abides in the first jhana, which is accompanied by applied and sustained thought, with rapture and pleasure born of seclusion. On such an occasion, he does not choose for his own affliction, or for another's affliction, or for the affliction of both. On that occasion, he feels only feeling that is free from affliction. The highest gratification in the case of feelings is freedom from affliction, I say. Again, with the stilling of applied and sustained thought, a bhikkhu enters upon and abides in the second jhana. On such an occasion, he does not choose for his own affliction, or for another's affliction, or for the affliction of both. On that occasion, he feels only feeling that is free from affliction. The highest gratification in the case of feelings is freedom from affliction, I say. Again, with a fading away as well of rapture, he enters upon and abides in the third jhana. Again, with the abandoning of pleasure and pain, he enters upon and abides in the fourth jhana. On such an occasion, he does not choose for his own affliction, or for another's affliction, or for the affliction of both. On that occasion, he feels only feeling that is free from affliction. The highest gratification in the case of feelings is freedom from affliction, I say. And what, bhikkhus, is the danger in the case of feelings? Feelings are impermanent, suffering, and subject to change. This is the danger in the case of feelings. And what, bhikkhus, is the escape in the case of feelings? It is the removal of desire and lust, the abandonment of desire and lust for feelings. This is the escape in the case of feelings. That those recluses and Brahmins who do not understand as it actually is the gratification as gratification, the danger as danger, and the escape as escape in the case of feelings, can either themselves fully understand feelings or instruct another so that he can fully understand feelings. That is impossible. That those recluses and Brahmins who understand as it actually is the gratification as gratification, the danger as danger, and the escape as escape in the case of feelings, can either themselves fully understand feelings or instruct another so that he can fully understand feelings. That is possible. That is what the Blessed One said. The bhikkhus were satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. So I'd like to turn now to two shorter suttas from the Aṅguttara Nikāya. They're both on the subject of removing, here it's translated as resentment. It's probably likely similar word that's being translated as ill will. It's not the exact term, it's very similar in meaning, roughly the second hindrance. So this is Aṅguttara Nikāya, the Book of the Fives, Sutta 161. Bhikkhus, there are these 5 ways of removing resentment, by which a bhikkhu should entirely remove resentment when it has arisen towards anyone. What 5? 1. One should develop loving kindness for the person one resents. In this way, one should remove the resentment toward that person. 2. One should develop compassion for the person one resents. In this way, one should remove the resentment toward that person. 3. One should develop equanimity toward the person one resents. In this way, one should remove the resentment toward that person. 4. One should disregard the person one resents and pay no attention to him. In this way, one should remove the resentment toward that person. 5. One should apply the idea of the ownership of karma to the person one resents. Thus, this Venerable One is the owner of his karma, the heir of his karma. He has karma as his origin, karma as his relative, karma as his resort. He will be the heir of any karma he does, good or bad. In this way, one should remove the resentment toward that person. These are the 5 ways of removing resentment by which a bhikkhu should entirely remove resentment when it has arisen toward anyone. And the next sutta, Sutta 162, this is spoken by Venerable Sariputta. There the Venerable Sariputta addressed the bhikkhus. Friends, bhikkhus. Friend, those bhikkhus replied. The Venerable Sariputta said this. Friends, there are these 5 ways of removing resentment by which a bhikkhu should entirely remove resentment when it has arisen toward anyone. What 5? Here, a person's bodily behavior is impure, but his verbal behavior is pure. One should remove resentment towards such a person. 2. A person's verbal behavior is impure, but his bodily behavior is pure. One should also remove resentment towards such a person. 3. A person's bodily behavior and verbal behavior are impure, but from time to time he gains an opening of the mind, placidity of mind. One should also remove resentment towards such a person. 4. A person's bodily behavior and verbal behavior are impure, and he does not gain an opening of the mind, placidity of mind from time to time. One should also remove resentment towards such a person. 5. A person's bodily behavior and verbal behavior are pure, and from time to time he gains an opening of the mind, placidity of mind. One should also remove resentment towards such a person. How, friends, should resentment be removed towards the person whose bodily behavior is impure, but whose verbal behavior is pure? Suppose a ragged-robed bhikkhu sees a rag by the roadside. He would press it down with his left foot, spread it out with his right foot, tear off an intact section, and take it away with him. So too, when a person's bodily behavior is impure, but his verbal behavior is pure, on that occasion one should not attend to the impurity of his bodily behavior, but should instead attend to the purity of his verbal behavior. In this way, resentment toward that person should be removed. Just as a note here, in a different translation, it expressed it a little more clearly that the image here is of a bhikkhu who's a rag robe, where seeing a rag by the roadside, and part of it's really dirty and can't be used, but part of it is usable. So kind of using his feet to tear off the usable section from the unusable part is the same way in which a person of this type should be regarded. How, friends, should resentment be removed towards the person whose verbal behavior is impure, but whose bodily behavior is pure? Suppose there is a pond covered with algae and water plants. A man might arrive, afflicted and oppressed by the heat, weary, thirsty, and parched. He would plunge into the pond, sweep away the algae and water plants with his hands, drink from his cupped hands, and then leave. So too, when a person's verbal behavior is impure, but his bodily behavior is pure, on that occasion one should not attend to the impurity of his verbal behavior, but should instead attend to the purity of his bodily behavior. In this way, resentment toward that person should be removed. How, friends, should resentment be removed towards the person whose bodily behavior and verbal behavior are impure, but who from time to time gains an opening of the mind, placidity of mind? Suppose there is a little water in a puddle. Then a person might arrive, afflicted and oppressed by the heat, weary, thirsty, and parched. He would think, there is this little bit of water here in the puddle. If I try to drink it with my cupped hands or a vessel, I will stir it up, disturb it, and make it undrinkable. Let me get down on all fours, suck it up like a cow, and depart. He then gets down on all fours, sucks the water up like a cow, and departs. So too, when a person's bodily behavior and verbal behavior are impure, but from time to time he gains an opening of the mind, placidity of mind, on that occasion one should not attend to the impurity of his bodily and verbal behavior, but should instead attend to the opening of the mind, the placidity of mind he gains from time to time. In this way, resentment toward that person should be removed. How, friends, should resentment be removed toward the person whose bodily and verbal behavior are impure, and who does not gain an opening of the mind, placidity of mind from time to time? Suppose a sick, afflicted, gravely ill person was traveling along a highway, and the last village behind him and the next village ahead of him were both far away. He would not obtain suitable food and medicine or a qualified attendant. He would not get to meet the leader of the village district. Another man traveling along the highway might see him and arouse sheer compassion, sympathy, and tender concern for him, thinking, "Oh, may this man obtain suitable food, suitable medicine, and a qualified attendant. May he get to meet the leader of the village district. For what reason? So that this man does not encounter calamity and disaster right here." So too, when a person's bodily and verbal behavior are impure, and he does not gain from time to time an opening of the mind, placidity of mind, on that occasion one should arouse sheer compassion, sympathy, and tender concern for him, thinking, "Oh, may this venerable one abandon bodily misbehavior and develop good bodily behavior. May he abandon verbal misbehavior and develop good verbal behavior. May he abandon mental misbehavior and develop good mental behavior." For what reason? So that with the breakup of the body after death, he will not be reborn in the plane of misery, in a bad destination, in the lower world, in hell. In this way, resentment toward that person should be removed. How, friends, should resentment be removed toward the person whose bodily and verbal behavior are pure, and who from time to time gains an opening of the mind, placidity of mind? Suppose there were a pond with clear, sweet, cool water, clean with smooth banks, a delightful place shaded by various trees. Then a man might arrive, afflicted and oppressed by the heat, weary, thirsty, and parched. Having plunged into the pond, he would bathe and drink, and then, after coming out, he would sit or lie down in the shade of a tree right there. So too, when a person's bodily and verbal behavior are pure, and from time to time he gains an opening of the mind, placidity of mind, on that occasion one should attend to his pure bodily behavior, to his pure verbal behavior, and to the opening of the mind, the placidity of mind that he gains from time to time. In this way, resentment toward that person should be removed. Friends, by means of a person who inspires confidence in every way, the mind gains confidence. These, friends, are the 5 ways of removing resentment, by means of which a bhikkhu can entirely remove resentment toward whomever it has arisen. So those are the 2 suttas that I will read today. I've got another 10 minutes or so. Open it up for questions and discussion.
I had first kind of 5 methods. There's one that said to disregard the person and not pay the person any attention. And it can seem like it would be like giving them the cold shoulder, but I wonder what your sense. It seems like it might be something along the lines of basically just not letting them take up mental space inside one's own mind, but not necessarily being like cold or indifferent. What was your sense on that?
Yeah, that sounds right. I think it was in that list, it was maybe the 3rd or the 4th. Maybe it was the 4th or the 5th, actually. Yeah, it was the 4th. And so often, with these sort of lists, it's like the first one is having metta, the second one is compassion, the third is equanimity. So my sort of sense is like, if you can't have metta, compassion, or equanimity for somebody, then just, don't focus on them, don't pay attention to them, don't attend to whatever they're doing. That seems kind of being the number 4 in that list. Start with the other first ones, and then if one can't totally just disregard the person, then I guess the 5th one, kind of the contemplation about the ownership of karma, that whatever that person's doing, it's obviously having impact on me, and so I'm focusing on their behavior, but one should try to think about it in the wise way, that whatever actions they're doing, for good or for ill, that's their own karma. They're creating their future with that. So yeah, so I think like giving somebody the cold shoulder might, the way we use that term, it's kind of a maybe a harsh, or a little bit of there's some ill will or aversion, and usually the way we use that term and kind of the way we think about it. So, but it's I guess it's something like just try not, if they're bringing up things that are hard for us, then just try not to attend to their, try not to worry about them at all, something like that.
It seems that, it makes sense that it's the 4th, because it's the first 3 are trying, you're trying to actually bring them into your mind, or you're actually dealing with them as present in your mind and what's going on with metta and compassion and equanimity. But then if you get to the point of realizing that you just can't bring them in, which is similar to what you're saying, you can't just actually, any kind of even notion of them just brings up too much aversion. There's not an ability to deal with that. Then it seems like, okay, then this is the only alternative. But the 5th one I also thought about as not just reflecting on their karma, but reflecting on your own karma. Because I often, just a phrase I'll say to myself is, why would I want to make their karma my karma? So in other words, often if somebody's bringing up something that's being done, is triggering one, then it does seem to be well, they're doing something, but now I'm making it my own karma by involving them, in my own mind. So that I've found is quite helpful, is just actually reflecting on my own karma and how I don't want to actually, it's it would be so counterproductive to actually make what's occurring to create more resentment, create more problems in my own actions. So it's I found that quite helpful. The fifth one quite helpful, but actually putting the lens on myself, not just reflecting on their karma, but my own. Because we are producing karma when we're actually engaging in resentment. So it's like we're doubling up. They're misbehaving possibly, and then now we're misbehaving.
Yeah. That fourth alternative, it's like a skillful means. It's kind of like in the removal of distracting thoughts. That fifth, or well, not even the fifth. Third one is sort of like not attending to the unskillful thoughts, and then the fifth one is kind of like removing it forcefully, or not tending to it quite strongly. It's sort of like when it's just a skillful means, so that you just sometimes you have to be kind of, if you can't if you can't bring up kindness, compassion, equanimity, then it's a skillful means to prevent your mind from going into reactivity. But it's I would have people ask questions sometimes like when they're in particularly very difficult situations with somebody else who's very difficult to be around, or even moving into abusive situations, who are confused because they say, well, the Buddha says I should have compassion, for these people. What am I supposed to do? I can't, do I stay in that difficult situation and try and work with them and, understand them, and maybe that they'll, see the faults of the harmfulness of their ways. And, it seems like the Buddha saying, just stick with it and, go to the very, drinking just attending to only the tiniest little part, even if there's a teeny little bit of goodness in not attending to all the difficulty or all the problem areas. And that's a very good reflection for one's own internal process, but I often have to think for myself, when I'm in situations where there's somebody who's just really, really, difficult and not amenable to correction, and then also other people who are in that situation, particularly abusive situations. Now it's sort of like there's again that skillful means. It's what your own capacities are, what you can do. If you can't, if there's no hope at this point in time, then the best thing to do is just remove yourself from the situation, get out. In the first reading you did, it was just kind of interesting how kind of the response to sensual desire, attachment to form, and attachment to feelings, or desire for form, desire for feelings, how I had a little trouble kind of discerning the difference between the first two, the way it was phrased, and I think there is an explanation in the footnote somewhere about what the difference between the sensual pleasures and desire for form, because some of the similes seem similar, but then the third one, the feelings, was entirely centered around, the refined feelings of jhana, essentially. Just the way he kind of used that to describe, the central desire that is still, inherently, in the end, still unsatisfactory. And you have to look at the escape in the desire for even the very, very refined mental states.
Yeah, it seemed to me like, when he talks about sensuality, sensual pleasures, it's like he defines it as the 5 chords of sensual pleasure, which are, form, sound, smells, tastes, tactile sensations, odors.
A little broader, I guess, than just the form.
Yeah. It's very, I just like, you kind of get that sense of what, a little bit of, sort of the historical situation of, there's there's kings and nobles and kind of all this sort of medieval type stuff, but it's the same old thing. People are just fighting with each other for power and wealth and influence and prestige, and then he's so aptly, pointing out that that's these desires within us as individuals are the cause of like political strife, war, global conflict. It's the same old thing,
Because we're all looking for something. Your own pleasure.
One of the methods of torture was an antelope. I didn't. Some of them were. I just couldn't figure
Yeah, you gotta go to the commentary.
But commentary.
Yeah. The Bhikkhu Bodhi doesn't have the whole section in the commentary, but if I don't know if we have a translation of the Majjhima Nikāya commentary. It's probably out there somewhere. Yeah, the porridge pot antelope.
It's just on the
Sounds pretty
carcass.
brutal.
We get the porridge pot every morning.
That's right. It's interesting that it's not that strange. Like in India at the time, they had those techniques, and like if you go to England, you can go to some sort of museum, I remember, where they show off different medieval tortures at the time. And they're quite uninspiring of human ingenuity.
It's just a question about in the last one about feelings, the danger of, say, jhana, and then the escape. So trying to, it seems like in the end, trying to even remove the lust and desire for concentrated states. But then it's interesting how it seems like after someone gets enlightened, they won't go back to sensual pleasures, right? But then in the case of the concentrated states, it seems like they'll still use the jhana or the pleasure coming from concentration after enlightenment.
Even though they're totally liberated and they're free from desire and lust, but they still practice jhana.
Yeah.
I think it's generally referred to as just like it's a pleasant abiding.
Yeah.
For somebody who's fully liberated, it's not like it's giving them more pleasure than their liberated mind or anything like that. It's just, if you're still alive, even as an arahant, you sort of have to rest your attention somewhere. You abide in some mental dwelling, and the jhanas or meditation or the contemplation of emptiness, or any one of those that they describe. It's just a place to rest, to refresh, to rest, and kind of regather your energies. But it isn't to reify or turn into something that you should do, or anything like that. Or it's not anymore a stepping stone to liberation because the mind is liberated. So that's how I understand.
Yeah, I guess I just find it interesting how it's like the sensual pleasures would be dropped, the attachment would be dropped to the sensual pleasures, and then the sensual pleasures themselves would be not sought after anymore after arahantship. But the concentrated states, the lust for them would be severed, but they'd still be sought after. They'd still be used or enjoyed or.
Yeah, all of those words kind of have kind of an inclination towards like going for something or wanting to get something, or like you said, sought after. And to me, it's sort of like the movement of mind is different than that. It's not like okay, I'm fully liberated, but I'm going to go and put my mind into jhana now, to enjoy something. It's more like just a stepping back, and it's when the mind is still not seeking pleasure, but it's, as I say, the mind needs a place to kind of set and rest while one is still in the human form. And so it's still part of the relinquishment, it's the letting go process, and what you're letting go into and what you're relaxing into ends up being one of these states. But it's not like being sought after, per se. It's how it's like the movement of the mind that happens, that one results getting into that.
I was just saying, you could also say that, for the Arahant, when they talk about it with the Eightfold Path, they're no longer, when it comes to the path, they're no longer in training. So like, ordinary people, stream enterers, once returners, non-returners, they're all in training on the Eightfold Path, trying to perfect it. But for an Arahant, they're beyond training, but they still maintain the Eightfold Path. They don't drop any of those things. They don't go to wrong livelihood. They don't go to wrong speech or wrong behavior or anything like that. So it's like at that point, in my understanding, the path is perfected. So samadhi, the eighth factor of the path, is perfected. Right view is also perfected. Right speech, right action, right livelihood, right mindfulness. These things are all perfected. And so there's many suttas where we'll talk about that. Even the Arhat disciples, and the Buddha, they dwell in the four foundations of mindfulness. Mm. They dwell in anapanasati, they dwell in all these different meditative concentrations, and it's like, where else would they dwell? They're not going to be going out and,
Or the Brahma Viharas.
Or the Brahma Viharas, exactly.
Yeah. They're just much more refined states of being. They're, it's sort of like, where would you dwell if you were... so it's like for example, the Buddha experienced back pain, but jhanas would be something that you wouldn't experience pain in.
He says that in the Parinibbana Sutta, that like there was one meditative attainment that he could be in where he wouldn't experience the pain.
Yeah, so it's sort of like, would an Arahant, if there's a choice between pain and not pain, going towards not pain, it doesn't mean that going towards would be out of unwholesome desire or aversion towards experience. I think it can just be like, it's just a pleasant abiding.
It's where it's the natural go-to.
Yeah.
It's more like it's a natural state of being for them at that point.
It's sort of like
working towards it, working for it.
While you're still operating within the conditioned realm, it's just, that kind of go-to place, to kind of like the default, the best alternative, the best default place of abiding. Mm-hmm.
And also, like when an Arahant would, the assumption Arahant, when they would come out of jhana, it wouldn't be this sucks. I just really can't believe I got to come out of this. It's so terrible. Jeez, I'll just go right back in. So that dukkha's gone. That there's no suffering.
That's clear. That's clear to me. It's more just like interesting how it's like they're still using it, or like the Buddha would go into retreat, right? And that it's still, whereas like he wouldn't go back to his wife, right? And be with her for a few months. So I guess
it's like because those states don't awaken, the becoming urge that results in rebirth.
It's blameless.
It's a kind of a blameless abiding. It's still an abiding, but it doesn't take you back into the wrong direction.
So I'm agreeing with the point of view that even on a coarser level, like contemporary beings that are considered arahants or enlightens, I've heard that they use like betel nut to help them get Dhamma talks or help clarity or quickness of mind. So using things that would generally be considered sensual pleasures as tools to even using those, but knowing gratification, a danger, and escape, so it's not a problem.
Yes, like the use of any medicine.
All right, well, it's probably about done for today.